Billy writes in, Lee Harris over at Limestone, with the fires out west, he is worried about his home here in Louisville if there are floods this spring. And he's wondering if he has his home listed, he gets a contract on there, and there's a flood. What happens if there's damage, and what happens to the contract? Does it go away? Does it eliminate?
Very good question. So there is a paragraph in the Louisville contract and in most contracts. It's entitled risk of loss. And it might be one of those paragraphs that a lot of people just kind of skim over because they don't think, oh, this isn't, this isn't going to happen, blah, blah, blah. But the risk of loss in the Louisville contract remains with the seller, meaning if something catastrophic happens during the pendency of the contract, the seller should be carrying insurance. You should not cancel your insurance by any means until you actually have transferred title. The buyer also should try to get a policy for their interest. But during this pendency of this contract, the seller has the risk of loss. So if a flood comes through and destroys the house, the seller can get their agreement with the buyer to use their insurance proceeds to fix it, but the buyer also has the right to void the contract under the GLAR terms and receive their earnest money back. So it is a valid issue because certainly a tornado could come through, a fire could come through, a flood could come through, and you would be bound by that agreement that the seller is at risk that the buyer could void.
So suggestions here, takeaways for our listeners. If you're buying a house, have contact with your insurance agents to have a binder on the house to insure. Or is there something else that needs to be done? I would say maybe the seller make sure that their insurance is up to date and
Yes.
right, just in case something does happen.
Yes, the seller should have their standard insurance policy, whatever they have had. You continue on with that. Don't let it lapse. Make sure you don't cancel it before closing. And the buyer should get a policy to ensure their interest, which is an equitable interest. Once I have a contract on a property that I'm entitled to buy, I have an equitable interest. So my interest can also be insured. It says that in the contract. It recommends that in the contract. A lot of people don't do that as buyers, but I think it's probably a very smart idea.
All right. Incidentally, if you'd like, we do a lot of videos we push out on YouTube and the like. If you want, you can sign up for our free bi-monthly video updates. Go to www.wesellouisville.tv. That's wesellouisville.tv.